In this episode, we take a deep dive into the hidden symbols and meanings of the costumes in Game of Thrones. Coming up. Welcome back to costumeco. I do almost weekly videos analyzing movies and TV shows from a costume perspective. Today, I am putting on my tinfoil hat and diving deep into some fan theories, viewer observations, and some of my own analysis that I have made over the last 7 seasons of the HBO series Game of Thrones. Warning, there are some major spoilers for all 7 seasons of Game of Thrones and one gruesome image. Sansa's pendant. In Season 4, Sansa presents herself in a new look, oftentimes referred to as Dark Sansa, an outfit that she's created from found materials in the Eyrie. I get asked about her pendant a lot, a piece that looks a bit like a belt buckle, and I have touched on it in previous Game of Thrones videos. In their video of the symbols of Game of Thrones, YouTuber Screen Prism have equated the circle divided by a line with the Greek letter phi or phi, depending upon where you live. This symbol also represents the golden ratio, sometimes called the golden mean or golden section. While it's a mathematical formula, it has been used in both art and architecture. So I'll leave a link to that if you want to check out their video. And then you might have noticed that the symbol is even contained within the Game of Thrones logo itself. And then we've seen this shape before to a certain extent in these annular brooches worn by our main characters. I had looked at costume designer Michelle Clapton as well and observed that she likes to wear these circular pendants herself, but without the center bar. The use of circular shapes is a common practice in the show, like this poison pool of water from the House of Black and White. Some fans of the show believe that the jewelry piece might actually represent the moon door, located in the high hall of the Eyrie, a hatch built into the floor through which people can fall to their deaths. Production designers created this specifically for the show. And we saw similar symbols with the circle and cross. On the left, a formation of bodies left by the White Walkers, and on the right, a Dothraki funeral pyre, the one that Dany survives unburnt. Showrunners Dave and Dan tell us that these symbols are intentional, that these ancient symbols used by the White Walkers lead back to the symbols used by the Children of the Forest around the weirwood tree. And then in Season 7, we witness these ancient symbols carved onto a wall of a dragonstone cave thought to be made by the Children of the Forest thousands of years ago. According to some forms of interpretation, the circle line symbol is a masculine or feminine element depending on its direction. The symbol on the left with the horizontal line indicates the passive female element and what has been there since the beginning of time and all things, while the symbol on the right with a vertical bar represents the active male element, indicating what comes on from high and the effective element in time. So where does this leave us with Sansa's pendant? It's not certain because her pendant is wonky and doesn't necessarily sit in one direction. Now, we might take some hint from Michelle Clapton's original sketch, which shows that the bar is definitely vertical, indicating an active male element. Perhaps Jon is the passive female element that helps measure her more hostile tendencies. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hexagons Symbol. We first meet Melisandre in Season 2 in the episode The North Remembers. Melisandre wears a choker made from interconnected 6-sided shaped polygons called hexagons. In the center of the choker is a ruby stone, the likely source of her youth and longevity. And the hexagon was a purposeful choice by costume designer Michelle Clapton. In an interview with New York Magazine, Clapton said, "I wanted something that was so quickly identifiable with her because she's out of place. I wanted her to be really strong, so we came up with that heptagonal piece." I think that Michelle Clapton misspoke in the interview when she said heptagon, which is actually a seven-sided shape. Here's an example of a heptagon within the seven-pointed star seen on the floor of the Sept of Baylor. One of Mel's gowns is made from a jacquard damask from the Ribelli Venezia collection in reverse. Manufacturer Ribelli states that the pattern comes from the ceramic ornamentation of the mausoleum of Sem Sultan in Bursa, dating back to the end of the 15th century. A natural formation of the hexagon is seen in basalt columns as seen here in Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. Columnar jointing is a natural occurrence in cooling lava flows. The number of sides of the individual columns can vary, with six-sided hexagons being the most common. And of course, one of the best-known examples of the hexagon in nature is the honeycomb. Viewer Andrea Valdez pointed out to me that mele means honey in Greek. Expanding on that concept, the name Melissa means bee in Greek. And in Greek mythology, Melissa was a mountain nymph who fed baby Zeus honey and hid him from his father Cronus, who was intent on devouring his progeny. But it's more likely that Melisandre's name derives from the Melissae, which translates as the bees. It was the name given to a triad of sisters in ancient Greece. The priestesses of the bee were able to see the future, interpret signs and omens provided by nature and the earth. That essentially makes Melisandre the queen bee of Westeros. And since the hexagon is part of the natural world, it's only likely that it would be used in art and architecture, like in this geometric pattern seen on a wall in Pompeii, or in the window of the Rushton Triangular Lodge in England. Here are some uses of the hexagon in Islamic architecture. The late Iraqi artist Issam el-Said says in his book Geometric Concepts in Islamic Art that the hexagon is commonly found in the tiling patterns of Islamic buildings. The hexagon is a shape commonly found in nature, so the architects of the Islamic buildings were perhaps trying to replicate this mystical and beautiful aspect of nature. The hexagram is used in historical, religious, and cultural contexts, including Islamic, Christian, Buddhist, and Jewish faiths. Here are three examples. On the left is Islamic mosaic in Ramla, Israel. In the center is a wood carving from Norfolk, England. And on the right, a wood carving from Tikrit, Iraq. The hexagram also has a usage in occultism and as a talisman in occult magic. Both of these red priestesses seen here have the clear markings of the elongated hexagons decorating their armor pieces. The priestess on the right has a nearly identical choker piece to Melisandre with the ruby center, while the priestess on the left wears a slave collar of sorts with a hanging hexagon. This makes sense since, like Melisandre, this priestess was originally a slave and a shy. And if you look closely, you can see the faint line of a hexagon printed on the kimono. From Season 6, both the male Red Priest Sanrush and the high-ranking Red Priestess Kinvara wear costumes edged with linked hexagons. Kinvara's gown and choker are also similar to Melisandre's. In Season 2, we are introduced to Quaithe the Shadow, and like Melisandre is a shadow binder. Of this look, Michelle Clapton said, "I used the same shaped links as I used on Melisandre's necklace to have a mask made, which was quite articulated." Her costume is also block print with the same motif. Here are Quaithe's mask and Melisandre's choker side by side so you can see the similarities. In Season 7, we see that the hexagon shape fits nicely into Dany and Missandei's dress openings. And then you can see that the shape is repeated in Dany's Dragonstone room. Production designer Deborah Riley's inspiration for the hexagonal tiles come from the aforementioned basalt columns in Ireland. Spiral Symbol. Michelle Clapton created this fantastic architecturally designed gown created from laser-cut leather in a spiral pattern. Here's a close-up of the laser-cut spiral taken from Dany's gown compared to the Targaryen sigil, also in a spiral formation. The sigil is also similar to another ancient symbol, but I'll get more into that in the next video. And we saw this symbol also in the formation of a 7-armed spiral of dead horses by the White Walkers. And in Season 6 by the Children of the Forest. Spirals are some of the oldest geometric shapes in ancient artwork, dating back as far as the Neolithic period, which was thousands of years before writing. Like the circle symbols, we also saw the spiral carved into the wall of the Caves of Dragonstone, also believed to be by the Children of the Forest. Petroglyphs, as these stone carvings are called, date back to prehistoric peoples. And you might notice that this spiral has 8 arms instead of 7, so this might be a bit of continuity error. Like the hexagon, the spiral is seen in nature, or in a hurricane or typhoon. The swirling pattern looks similar to the Arevakek, or Armenian Wheel of Eternity. In medieval Armenian culture, it symbolizes the concept of everlasting, celestial life. The Arevakek is Armenian for sun cross and is one of the most common symbols of Armenian architecture. To take it one step further, the forward and backward swirls are complementary, similar to the dual energies of yin and yang. The swirl on Danny's dress, meanwhile, is forward-leaning, therefore representing the male energy, and like Sansa's pendant, is not balanced without the female energy. Memento Mori. Memento Mori is a direct translation from Latin meaning remember death. It's an object serving as a warning or reminder of death, such as a skull. And like Game of Thrones saying Valor Morgulis, which translates to all men must die in High Valyrian, Memento Mori is the medieval Latin Christian theory and practice of reflection on mortality. Here are 2 examples of 17th century rings with Memento Mori featuring ruby gems. According to the Met, Memento Mori jewelry emerged in the Renaissance when goldsmiths and other artists developed moralistic images that contrasted youth and beauty with death and decay. In Game of Thrones, the first example I have of Memento Mori is with Cersei's first black jacquard morning gown, the one that she wears when she presides over Joffrey's body in the Great Septa Baler, just after his death. This elaborate beading is by embroidery artist Michelle Carragher and features brass jump rings and seed beads. But if you zoom in really close, you can see these little brass skulls hidden amongst the larger cluster of jump rings. Thank you to my good friend Patrick Lemieux who helped point this out to me. The second example of Memento Mori is Cersei's second morning gown, a bit of a transition gown for her because she also wears it during Tyrion's second trial by combat. So here, if we look at the embroidery and beading by Michelle Carragher, we see in the middle image the profile of 2 lion skulls, and then on the far right, a lion head with half of the face a skull. Add to this an assortment of beads that look like bone vertebrae or even animal teeth. This symbolism captures Memento Mori. Daggers symbol. If we look closely, this fanciful dagger motif appears on multiple costumes from seasons 3 to 5. The daggers first make an appearance on Joffrey in season 3, episode 4. The costume is also featured prominently on an Entertainment Weekly cover, the golden dagger motif on a crimson background. Costume designer Michelle Clapton has stated in interviews that the wardrobe weaves and prints many of the show's fabrics, so I indicated in a previous video that I believe this fabric was custom made for the show. You might remember that during a fitting with his tailor, Joffrey demanded a fabric with no flowers, and when the tailor presented the dagger fabric swatch, Joffrey said, "Much better." I suppose that on the surface level, Joffrey wants to appear more dangerous than he actually is. Here he is having a full-on meltdown in season 3, episode 10 in the same costume. And then flash forward to season 4, episode 3, Joffrey is laid to rest in a black funeral coat printed with the same dagger motif. Picking up the torch, Cersei appears at Tyrion's trial in a gown made from the black dagger fabric. And then in season 5, episode 3, while it's not as overt, Cersei incorporates it into the lining of her kimono sleeves. So what might this mean? There is a significant dagger in Game of Thrones called the Assassin's Dagger that Arya Stark now possesses, but it doesn't resemble the golden motif dagger that we see on the fabric. This type of dagger more closely resembles a dagger glyph used in typography, which closely resembles a cross. In typography, the dagger is commonly referred to as an obelisk, with an ancient Greek origin meaning spit, nail, or pointed pillar. Obelisk can also mean needle, like in the case of Arya Stark's weapon. Interestingly, in typography, the dagger is also used to indicate death, extinction, or obsolescence. When placed immediately before or after a person's name, the dagger indicates that the person is deceased. In this usage, it is referred to as the death dagger. This sort of sums up Joffrey's arc nicely, no? But what might this mean for Cersei? After some digging, I determined that this type of dagger in the motif is a crossbar dagger, like the one the cat is holding in this scene from Season 2. The crossbar is sometimes called a quillon. With the dagger from Cersei in Joffrey's costume, the crossbar or quillon forms an S shape. Quillon daggers remained popular in the 16th century after the sword type it resembled had fallen out of use. Both of these daggers pictured here are from the Royal Armouries collection in the UK and date from the 16th century. Jaime uses a quillon dagger to kill the Stark captain Jory Cassell back in Season 1. Notice that the quillon is S-shaped just like from the motif. Daggers can also represent cultural symbolism. They may be associated with deception, stealth, and/or treachery due to the ease of concealment and surprise that someone would inflict with one on an unsuspecting victim. Never is this more true than with Littlefinger's betrayal of Ned Stark in Season 1. The imagery of the dagger, paired with a cloak, is also associated with the archetypal spy or assassin. The cloak worn to hide one's identity or remain hidden from view, and the dagger a concealable and silent weapon. A cloak and dagger attack is one in which a deceitful, traitorous, or concealed enemy attacks a person. Arya's cloak in these circumstances are her masks. Putting aside Jaime, Littlefinger, and Arya, Cersei herself is the queen of Dirty Pool. She embodies deceit and treachery, which is why she is so dangerous. She will throw anyone under the bus, even her own brother. And then there is one final possible meaning. As you can see from this image that's translated as necessary instruments for the magical arts, ceremonial daggers are an important tool used in many pagan rituals, which I think is fitting considering that Cersei's own Hand of the Queen, Qyburn, is a disgraced former maester who dabbles in necromancy. A ceremonial blade called an anime appears in certain versions of the Key of Solomon, a grimoire or book of spells originating in the Middle Ages. The anime's primary use is to channel and direct psychic energy, generally conceived as etheric fire. This traditional style black-handled anime from 13 Moons Magical Supplies is a modern anime used as a Wiccan ceremonial dagger and is never used for cutting. I have another video coming looking at more secret symbols contained within the costumes. And as you likely know, the 8th and final season of Game of Thrones is out this spring, so I'll be producing lots more Game of Thrones content. Make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss any of my 2019 content. In the meantime, you can check out my top 20 best Game of Thrones women's costumes.